It's my feel-good breakfast show.
A very warm welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast show. This is Expresso on SABC3. Thank you so much for joining us as we enter into our Medical Tuesday chat. And today we all understand, I think, that anyone who's ever lost a loved one will understand that those last months or years can be incredibly stressful and painful, not just for the loved one themselves, but for the extended family as well. And this is where palliative care then comes in, a specialized medical field where healthcare professionals make sure that these last months or last days are as stress-free as possible. And this morning we're very thankful to be joined by psychiatrist Dr. Linessa Moodley and palliative care specialist Dr. Michelle Meyering to help us understand the ins and outs. Thank you so much for being here, ladies, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
And we're also going to be welcoming questions from our viewers, so please give us a call on 083-9133-728 should you have any concerns or questions regarding palliative care, which is the first question that I want to ask, perhaps, ladies, just for you to explain exactly what palliative care is.
So palliative care is the holistic care of patients with life-threatening and life-limiting conditions. I often like to compare it with acute care. So if you break an arm, you go to the hospital, we put on a plaster, we give you some painkillers, and we send you on your way. And mostly you're okay. But if you have a very serious life-threatening condition, that's not enough. You need a lot more support. It has a huge psychological impact on you, and your family needs more support. So we have to be much more holistic in our approach, and we need a whole team to provide proper palliative care.
Yeah. And how does it differ from hospice care?
I think hospice care is perhaps the better known component of palliative care, and in fact it is probably the most feared component as well. But palliative care is broad-based. It's particularly centered around communities and involves a lot of home-based care. So hospice is simply a component of that for certain people who may need a step up from home-based care, that they would be admitted into a hospice. It's certainly not the only component, and as I've said, the majority of the care that's actually done in palliative care is home-based and home-oriented. And the purpose of palliative care, one of the components of it, is to actually prevent unnecessary admissions. So keeping the focus at home, in communities, surrounded by additional support of family and friends.
Yeah. I mean, just the thought of losing a loved one is difficult enough to process on its own. Do you find that this is maybe the reason why people don't have this conversation openly, especially on a community level, on a family level?
Yeah. I think the conversations around death and dying are things that most people go to extraordinary lengths to try and prevent. In fact, as a society, we're quite focused on staying well and living long. We don't really talk about the inevitability of death, and it is something that I think has a lot of superstition around. People tend to feel that if you start talking about it, you're going to somehow summon it, and so try to tend to avoid these conversations. A recent study in Australia actually revealed that up to 82% of people think you should be talking about your end-of-life wishes, but only 27% have actually done so. So it really goes to show that we do avoid this conversation. We find it quite painful, and it's only when you're really confronted with a life-threatening illness that you will be forced to have the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to keep you here, and please, can't wait to just get a bit more of your insights into this. And so that's why we've kept our lines open, 083-9133-728. Give us a call if you have any concerns or questions regarding palliative care and all that surrounds it. Right now, let's head on over to the kitchen. We'll be right back.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Now, the main focus of our Medical Tuesday chat today is palliative care, and we're joined by psychiatrist Dr. Linessa Moodley and palliative care specialist Dr. Michelle Meyering, trying to understand the ins and outs of this very important and perhaps very complex side of medical practice. And we also invite your calls on 083-9133-728 should you have any questions or concerns. We know that this is something that really does touch on every single one of us, because death is, unfortunately, one of those inevitable parts of life. I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Linessa, and from your professional point of view, how psychiatry plays a part and comes into palliative care.
Yeah, so as Michelle mentioned, palliative care involves assessing different needs across multiple domains. So those involve the biological needs, psychological needs, and spiritual needs of individual patients. So mental well-being is a strong component of one of these. There's also significant overlap between the disciplines of psychiatry and palliative care. Both use holistic frameworks, both use multidisciplinary teams, and both are strongly collaborative in the sense that they involve active participant and engagement between individual patients, their families, and their healthcare workers. We also know that in the population that receives palliative care, up to 50% of these individuals may develop depressive symptoms at some point in their illness. And this will, of course, have an adverse impact on not just their mental health well-being, but also their physical health and their relationships with the supports that are around them. So the field of palliative psychiatry or palliative care psychiatry has begun emerging as a new speciality, and it really serves to address the mental health needs of the patients, the families, as well as the team members on the palliative care team. A lot of people have a lot of preconceptions around psychiatry. There's a lot of stigma around the field itself, and people tend to think that if you're going to see a psychiatrist, there must be something really wrong with you.
Yes.
You must be very pathologized. And we found that in this field in particular, that's absolutely not the case. We're dealing with people who are otherwise quite healthy and who are facing abnormal situations and need additional support to help them through.
Yeah, and speaking of the perceptions and perhaps the more negative ones that people hold, especially in regards to palliative care, people might think that it's a way of giving up on the certain family member. What would you have to say to them, Dr. Merin?
Palliative care is definitely not about giving up. I think a lot of the myths and misconceptions about what palliative care is leads to that misperception, and the focus is really not on death and dying. Death and dying is a very important part of palliative care, but really it's much broader. And palliative care should start from the time of diagnosis, which, as you mentioned, could be weeks or even years. And we find that people that know that they are dying actually live life more intentionally. If you look at the definition of palliative care, the word life and quality of life is actually mentioned far more than the word dying is. I think another big myth is that if you are in a palliative care program, you have to give up on your search for a cure or curative options, and that's not true. You can start palliative care alongside chemotherapy. You don't have to have exhausted all treatment options. So it's very important that the community understand that we're not just about death and dying, we're actually more about living life to the full. The founder of palliative medicine, Dame Cecily Saunders, said palliative care was about living until you die. And then when the time is inevitable, to help you to die more gently. And we find patients and families have tremendous spiritually enhancing experiences in palliative care.
That's an extraordinary and profound mindset shift to have to make. And we're going to ask you to please stay with us, ladies, because when we come back, I want to find out more about the role that the family plays, and just to kind of tap into the conversation we had in the beginning about how can families start having these conversations openly. And of course, we invite your calls on 083 9133 728.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
And a very warm welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast show on this Tuesday morning. We're joined by Dr. Linessa Moodley and Dr. Michelle Mering. We are understanding the ins and outs of palliative care. And of course, as we always do, we invite your calls on 083 9133 728. Rolf from Lenasia is on the line right now. Good morning, Rolf.
Hi, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm very, very well. Thank you for your call. What is your question or your comment?
I'm a retired superintendent with the Johannesburg Metro Police. Okay.
Yes.
And I do a lot of community work, you know. And I help a lot of victims that are involved in accidents and so on, you know. The problem we have, a lot of these medical aid schemes do not pay for parental care. They always have got some problem when you want to use it. They say it's not on their scheme. What do we do in this instance? Tell me.
Thank you so much for that question, Rolf. Ladies, could you weigh in with your insights and perhaps experience in the industry about that question?
I think he's correct. A lot of medical aids, unfortunately, don't offer palliative care benefits. Medical aids are starting to wake up to it and provide care.
Yes.
And actually, it's to the benefit of medical aids to be able to provide that care, because they actually find that it saves money. Because if we can keep families better pain controlled, more symptom-free, and we can keep them at home, we actually save money and we actually improve the quality of care that patients provide. So my advice would be, if your medical aid doesn't provide it, then you should actually ask them to consider the benefits of providing palliative care to families.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and to add to that, we know that palliative care is available in certain state facilities. It's not broadly available yet. And certainly that some medical aids offer it. the greater the demand, the greater the supply can be. And we know that there are about 40 million people worldwide that need palliative care, and only 14% have been accessing it. So as South Africans, we would encourage people to request palliative care, to draw more attention to it, and to put pressure on your medical aids to start providing palliative care packages, as it is a significant cost reductor in terms of overall care.
Yeah. So I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because that was going to be one of my next questions about how accessible it is to most South Africans who need palliative care. And like you're saying right now, some state-owned institutions do offer it, but not all of them. And by raising the point, by requesting it at our local medical care centres, we can bring attention to it and start perhaps directing funding towards it.
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're going to take one more small break, ladies, and we'll come back again. And once again, we would love to have you call us on 08391333728 as we discuss our medical chat on this Tuesday.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Indeed, still with Dr. Moodley and Dr. Meiring as we discuss palliative care and the ins and outs thereof. Corin joins us on the line from Cape Town. Good morning to you, Corin.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for your call. What is your question or your comment?
Okay, I just got a comment. My dad suffered from dementia. Okay, and
Yes.
he was in a childcare center. When it came to end stage, end of life, the home we was at, they didn't allow me to actually stay with him. I had to leave at 9 in the evening. And that was very disturbing because I needed to be with my dad. And then he was transferred to a palliative care ward at Expresso Hospital, where I was allowed to stay with him day and night for 5 days. Do you know how comforting it was for me to be able to be there, hold his hand for those 5 days, and he passed on with me being there. Okay, so the palliative care, it meant a lot to him and to me, and especially helped with the grieving process. I was sad, but I had the comfort that I was with my dad when he died, and that he knew I was there as well.
Corin, thank you so much for your call and sharing your story with us. And perhaps this taps into, Michelle, what we spoke about a little bit earlier on about new policy that's being developed around palliative care by the government. Please tell us a bit more about that.
We actually had very exciting news last week on the 6th of April that the National Health Council has actually approved a national palliative care policy for South Africa. And what that's going to mean is that actually more South Africans are going to be able to access this care. Currently, it is largely has been developed out of the hospice movement, so it's been provided by NGOs, and people haven't been able to access public sector palliative care. So this policy is going to ensure that people can have the kind of experience that she talks about, where she's part of the team that is allowed to be with her father in his last days.
Wow, that is great news indeed. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, but most importantly, I wanted to tap into how families can start having these very difficult conversations that we've been talking about.
I think the place to start is to actually start talking even before illness enters the room. The reality is we are all going to die, and we do need to start thinking about what the future holds for us, what our wishes will be in the event that we can't speak for ourselves, and to try and take away the stigma and the fears associated with palliative care. Simply just sitting and talking is really the way to start, without the fear.
And the children, you were saying, are most important, right?
Yeah, now death is the big taboo. People are happy to talk about sex, but they don't want to talk about death and dying, and it's part of the circle of life. We make plans for births, we decide how we're going to give birth, where we're going to give birth, but people don't like to talk about dying, and particularly when it comes to children. Because after all, children are not supposed to die, they're supposed to outlive their parents. But sadly, for some children, death is part of their life-limiting condition. And the more we talk about it, the more we are able to actually deal with it properly and to get the closure that we need before our loved one dies.
Dr. Meiring, Dr. Moodley, thank you so much for your time,
pleasure.
your expertise, and mostly for the comfort you've offered us all with this medical chat that we've had today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
for having
you.
us.
And thank you also to all of our callers that did dial in and share their stories with us. But stay tuned, there's still lots more to come on your Feel Good Breakfast show.